Hello and welcome everybody to another edition of the Talking in Stations Aftershow with me, McLeod. I have with me a few people to talk about some awesome topics about Eve. We have Caleb. Just say hello, Caleb, if you're here.
Hey guys.
Yeah, nice. We have Greybeard as well, or Greybeard. He's probably a little okay at the moment. That's all good. We have Robbie, though, on webcam, which is absolutely awesome. He's literally just there. Say hey, Robbie.
Hi, everybody.
And so long as we haven't lost him to fleet fights and such things like that, we have Villy from TiS as well, who's here, which is really awesome. Say we'll get back to that. Anyway, Villy will probably be back to us in a little bit.
Oh no, I'm here with you. We're just fighting some Serbs.
Yeah, nice. Cool, man. So yeah, in the Talking Stations show a little while ago, we were talking about fleet combat, FCing, all the meta involved around that. I kind of wanted to continue that topic in the sense of it was something that you didn't talk too much about. It was more sort of the fleet concept and metas, centered around the metas and that kind of stuff, as well as a little bit of background and history and stuff. But I was kind of wondering, we kind of skimmed past the subject of learning, learning to FC. Well, a little bit anyway. But I kind of wanted to sort of know, Rob, Villy, when you learned to FC, was it something that you guys Villy, did you say you just jumped into sort of into it basically as a way of there was a job that needed to be done and you stepped up to the plate sort of thing?
Yeah, for the most part, that's generally how I did it anyways. Things needed to get done and somebody needed to step up and do it, and I offered, and it kind of progressed from there, I guess.
Awesome, man. Because a lot of people a lot of sort of established groups like to actually try and train FCs in some sort of FC program as part of the graduates, which is a nullsec megacorp split off from Eve University. We get a fair few people come to us that think that we are basically a progressed version of Eve University, and they kind of look to us to sort of try and learn some kind of formalized FC program, which we kind of do, but we kind of don't. But have you ever had any experiences? Any of you guys had any experiences in the any kind of formal FC program? And if so, what kind of what was it like?
Not really. A lot of my kind of background with FCing doesn't really come from Eve as much as it comes from World of Tanks. And I know that's a little tangential to Eve and such, but when tank companies were a thing back in the day, I ran those a lot. And apparently I ran them all until the people kept coming back. So that's where a lot of my experience with this sort of stuff comes. So I'll let Villy go on about it more if he wants to, because he has a lot more Eve-related experience than I do. The biggest thing I've ever taken out were jackdaws. So I'll let Villy handle most of this, if that's all right with you guys.
All right. Can you repeat the question? Sorry, I just got some stuff going on.
Yeah, totally fine, man. A lot of people either jump into FCing or sort of end up having to go through, or end up sort of going through a formalized FC training program. Bearing in mind you've been FCing for quite some time, I imagine you probably have had some kind of, or experienced some degree of formalized FC training. And if so, what was that like?
No.
Yeah, you haven't in any way, shape, or form.
No,
wow. Okay.
When I started FCing back in 06, 07, there wasn't there was no classes or programs, and especially not in the way alliances try to do it now. It was far more organic. You stand with 10 guys and you camp a gate, and somebody says we should camp a gate now, and so you all decide, oh, we'll go camp a gate, and then you camp a gate, and something happens, and you say, you have the strongest command presence within that group, and you say, Jim, jam him, and Timmy, tackle here and do that, and it just kind of, then you're doing 20-man gangs and 30, and then all of a sudden, you kind of apply that knowledge to 50 or 100-man gangs, and once you're at the 50, 100-man gang, the only real step up is when you're commanding multiple fleets at once, which is an even more different experience than commanding, just one group of 250 people.
Yeah, definitely. So like your sort of FC training is very much in the old school kind of form of learning on the spot, learning on the go, which, like, I'm, yeah. I mean, to be honest, that's that's put you in good stead. Like, your name in terms of when it comes to sort of FCing, it holds a lot of weight. So that's, obviously it's a tried and tested method that works extremely well. Yeah, I mean, Caleb, like, have you ever? Well, I mean, you haven't really experienced too much FCing as such, or like, have you ever decided try to?
I don't undock. I have not undocked since like 07 or 08 or something like that. But I was going to segue a little bit and ask a question about something related to this topic, and
go for it, man.
Very relevant to the whole CSM summit, because I think it was Arendis the other day that said something in the line of FC's frustration about how when CCP changes things, the people that it hurts the most is actually the FCs and the whole doctrine creation and rebalancing everything to new changes. So I was just going to ask really what his thoughts are on what we can expect with the minutes coming out soon, and how big the changes are going to be, and how frustrating that might actually be.
CSM minutes don't really affect anything, really. When the CSM makes a decision is allowed to implement or affect a decision, we will see that impacted in the game at some point. But for the most part, it's always been my policy to basically ignore everything the CSM and CCP talks about until they actually do it.
Of course. I'm just thinking the things like the T3 changes and the ROC changes and things like that we've been promised for a while. And I'm suspecting that there's going to be news about some of that, right? So are you planning on doing stuff? And do you have any idea of where they're going to land?
No idea, no plans. As I say, I literally do not think about it. I do not touch it. I do not plan for it at all when it comes to this kind of stuff, because literally, like, we waited for fleet booster changes for almost 3 years, right? Like, I know in both Test and Goonswarm, when I was there for a while, we had actually, we slacked off on telling people to have link characters available for like that last year, because we had been kind of promised links for 2 years before. And the changes never came, so all of a sudden we were starting to hit a point where people were like literally de-skilling their links pilots because they thought the link changes were coming, and then we couldn't get links. Like, until it's in game, until I've got the hard data, until I've got the module in my fucking hand, I don't give a shit what CCP says they're going to do. I kind of only handle with what CCP has done, because otherwise, you're playing a dangerous game. I mean, there's some predictory kind of stuff you can do, but for the most part, it's just like light theory crafting. That's about it.
Yeah, I mean, you can theory craft all you want, but like, like it's superbly actually colossally kind of stupid to try and theory craft on proposed changes that haven't been finalized, and then find that, like, suddenly when it actually gets pushed to live, that the changes, that there's been other changes that have kind of either broken the plans that you've made, and even worse, if you've actually put financial kind of if you put capital into into securing certain assets for that particular kind of change, then you can screw yourself quite significantly by trying to be ahead of the curve, if you know what I mean. So, and it's a good kind of. Sorry, man. What was that?
I was just curious, because I was just curious about how much is going to end up being fallowed on hangar floors and stockpile issues and how much it's about only responding when the change is actually there. So that's just because of my interest in how much volatility I can expect from market changes and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, that's kind of one.
We're already going to see it now, if I'm not mistaken. We're going to see it with the raw coal maybe tanking a bit, and that means all the fits related to that and stuff like that. So I was just curious of whether there was any inside preparation for changes like that.
I mean, I think there always is some sort of preparation that's going on when changes like these are talked about. It's just I don't think a lot of them, like not being involved in the process at all, say maybe like 95% of those probably never make it past the point of, okay, were this to actually happen in the manner they're describing it, here's what we might do. And I would think that in all of these organizations, you've got that really sort of high level, dark smoke filled room place where all this sort of theory crafting goes on. And then there's a different dark smoke filled room that they let everybody else see into with regards to, hey, this is what's coming down the pipe and such like that.
I'm just looking forward to the impact of the new carrier doctrine. So that's going to be nice.
That's going to be an interesting one.
Yeah, I'm just really mad that the carrier that I actually physically own is the only one not included.
Typical.
Yeah, no, it's just like, But it's okay, that pilot has bigger toys now, so.
Anyone's got any comments on the changes to the CSM? And, well, there's no white paper anymore. Now we have that code of conduct thing.
Have they dumped the white paper, or are they making changes?
It's totally cancelled. They've changed it to a one-page description of code of conduct, and breaching that is basically the only rules that are applied now.
Yeah, the thing that I have an issue with like something like a one-page code of conduct is like it's difficult to nail down like certain things in such a sort of such a succinct kind of fashion without actually not actually closing loopholes around certain things. So like I'm not sure about that. That's the thing that I'm kind of concerned about.
I just think it's at least a benefit that people don't have to read a 30-page description of things. Yeah.
I'd just like to say thank you very much to Cranky Old Nerd, by the way. 5 months. That's awesome, man. Thank you. But yeah, in like bringing this back to sort of like the sort of fleet concepts and sort of fleet meta and stuff like that. Like I think when I was like learning to FC and sort of taking part in some FCing and that kind of thing, there was much more. I think the fleet metas around that time were much more holistic and complete, and it was a bit more stable. You had like probably about 4 different types, or 3 or 4 different types of actual like proper fleet concepts that were essentially like hard counters for each, in a sort of rock paper scissors sort of fashion. It seems very much like New Age EVE Online when it comes to fleet metas are like less hard counters and a whole of a lot more different types of soft counters. Except obviously when it comes to super cap escalations, in which case for the most part it's an N+1 number kind of situation, or as some certain groups have showcased an actual skill, a very much a sort of learning how to or knowing how to actually fly your super cap and your Titan and fitting it thus. Like, any of you guys have any thoughts on that, like how it's kind of progressed, how the meta's progressed?
I mean, having not been involved in that sort of stuff as long as you guys have, I was very much the guy running missions in a Raven and high sec for a very long time. But it seems like there's 2 different types of things that really tend to come out. There's the ones that are intended to function kind of everywhere, and then there's ones that are intended to function in like really heavy tie-dye. I think it's really interesting to look at those things as they are distinct from each other, because
Mm-hmm.
You do have, like, for example, Alpha Fleet as a thing. It makes sense when you look at Alpha Fleet as a function, as a thing intended to function in high tie-dye, because you don't have to necessarily worry about weapons continuing to cycle. It's really just, okay, we get the one shot off, and if the one shot doesn't do it, then that's that. We move on to somebody else. That it still works outside of high tie-dye situations, but it's not necessarily the optimal call to make outside of high tie-dye. So I think it's really
Oh
interesting
no.
to see which groups bring various doctrines to a fight on how they expect it to escalate.
Well,
Nobody really factors tie-dye into the way fleet comps are chosen, aside from in some situations, certain comps become basically unkillable in tie-dye. Uh, like when you're talking about a doctrine like Alpha Fleet works significantly better in not tie-dye. It does okay in tie-dye, but it does much better when the gun, you're at 0 tie-dye, because it's that much more difficult for your enemy to respond and rep things, because there's no warn up. It's just zoom, you're dead. Zoom,
Yeah.
you're dead.
just dump, dead. The ability to literally just say, that guy there, I don't want him on the field.
To a degree, like time response, or how do I put this? The response speed of logistics is a really important factor in fleet fights, and certain comps like Alpha Fleet and Macarials and such. They work much better when that is stressed to the maximum, and if you add in tie-dye, it actually works against them for most cases.
Yeah, I'm just thinking when I'm saying, like, I mean, the, like, really heavy tie-dye where stuff doesn't always respond on time, where you do get that sort of, the game is starting to break as you get further into it. That definitely, I think, influences what you're talking about. But yeah, I understand where you're coming from there, and shows you how much I've actually been on Alpha Fleets.
The one thing which I know that I've experienced is especially when it comes to sort of high tie-dye kind of fights. The high tie-dye kind of fights tend to be the sort of, the much more massive sort of slugfests where people have escalated to capitals and potentially to super caps kind of thing. And in that kind of situation, there are, like, I have considerably noticed that there are groups that know that if they bring a certain fleet comp, be it supers, be it titans, that kind of thing, that they know that, like, from a server, from a sort of a server action response sort of field of view, that their fleet and their actions, the actions that their fleet are going to take, are going to get priority over things like subcaps, or things like, sort of say dreadnoughts, that kind of thing. Like we had that which fight was it where Goons lost an absolute ton and a half of dreadnoughts because they literally couldn't respond because of tie-dye, that kind of thing. I can't remember which one it was. But yeah, it's just a case of, like, if you drop certain fleets onto a high tie-dye kind of environment, certain ship sizes seem to respond better. Seem to have the server respond better to them than smaller fleet comms. And I always found that quite fascinating, how that also influences certain higher level kind of strategic decision making in terms of a high tie-dye fight. But one of the other things, like, I know that, like, some of you guys can't really speak much about that, and that's understandable. But one of the other things is that I think also needs, like, it's like a myth that needs to be dispelled, is when it comes to tie-dye, like, a lot of people see tie-dye as a dirty word, it's like tie-dye is like a bad thing kind of thing. And to some degree I can understand that, but, like, I think what a lot of people don't understand is when tie-dye gets to 10%, that's when tie-dye as a system, to keep things stable, to keep things kind of fair, and to keep things working fairly eloquently, breaks down. When it gets to 10% tie-dye, that's the maximum that particular system that CCP developed can function. And after that, when it hits that 10%, that's when you get old school kind of lag. and I think a lot of people don't realize that. I don't know, like how do you guys in your sort of corporations and your alliances sort of get that? There's that same sort of stigma with tie-dye? Do you say?
I would just say that tie-dye is just, it's part of nature, I guess. It's something that exists and you work around it and you anticipate it, where you know, if you're in a situation where you have 500 or more pilots likely to engage in a fight, you're going to have some level of tie-dye. And as such, you take tie-dye into, the tie-dye sludge into consideration when you consider reinforcement speeds. You take tie-dye into consideration in the way that dictors affect movement, and the way that your gates, jumping in through a gate, will affect things. On the actual battlefield, you consider tie-dye more so in just the way that you call targets and the speed at which you call targets and how you properly manage your gun cycles and stuff. But you also are given significantly more time to do so because of tie-dye. So it's just, it's part of nature. It's part of the wildlife. You know, you deal with it as it happens, kind of thing.
It also provides very good opportunities to plan out your dinner menu based on it. If you are going to have that large of a fight, I know there's been a couple articles recently about, hey, this is good food to cook when you're sitting in 10% tie-dye waiting 5 minutes for your guns to cycle.
And we've had some on INN. We've had some interesting articles as to the goings on with people who have decided to do certain extra activities in the middle of tie-dye fights, which have been hilarious actually. Like what's some examples? Like, Caleb, do you know some examples of that? Like what's been happening?
Sorry, I'm helping Gommel with stuff about his stream, so I have actually not followed anything you said.
Well, I know.
Okay, well, sorry.
I know Tiberius was, I think, kind of the first place this came in, as it was mentioned during the live blog of the death of the MTACO Keepstar, that he went and made some dish. I forget exactly what it was. And then when it came time for the F4R2 fight, somebody else mentioned, I went and made this. And personally, for F4R2, I went out and went to a drive-through, bought a cheeseburger, and came back during the middle of that fight. So I think that's kind of where it first picked up. Was Tiberius was the first one to kind of include that.
Making his pies and random stuff like that.
Yes, it was some sort of pie.
Yeah. I'm like half expecting. I kind of want to see, like, a little bit sort of a branching out from not just random foodstuffs as such, of people making stuff, but like actual kind of project. Like, can I actually rebuild my my 8-cylinder engine block in the middle of this tie fight? That'd be pretty insane. Impressive. I mean, to be fair, like, you can. I mean, I guess you can technically control, like, as long as you have the right software, you can control an Eve client that's running on your PC with your phone. Like, I've seen it done before, and I know it's done before. Yeah, so it is entirely possible. That would be hilarious, though. Like, actually sort of, what would it be? Like literally someone fixing their engine while controlling their tie-dye fight via a phone from their garage. I've seen some other things. I know that there's, like, I've heard of some other people who have actually been participating in fleets and fights and stuff like that via, sort of the airport Wi-Fi at a departures lounge, that kind of thing. That's been pretty insane. That's pretty cool. Not actually flying though. That would be cool.
Yeah. I imagine there will be some point where somebody will be like, yeah, I have seen this fight from an airplane. Which I would love to hear the flight crew's response to hearing somebody try and see a fleet. That would be kind of amazing. Would also probably make national news, that being said.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have an FC in our on our flight who's busy I don't know. But yeah, so what do you guys want to talk about? I actually, at the moment, in Eve, at the moment, like, what we have as a background is I'm flying through some exceptional kind of backgrounds in Eve, so that's pretty cool. Like, just flying through between the various different Eve kind of trading hubs at the moment. So that's the background that we have at the moment on the Talking Stations Aftershow. I would like to say, if you'd like to join into the discussion by voice, you can jump on the Talking Stations Discord. I'll just get the link now for you as well for that. Give me a second.
And I mean, hey, they let pretty much everyone in here. So since I'm here, please come and join us. It's fun. There's always good discussion and such going on. So it's a good place to hang out.
I mean, we can, the other thing is, like, it's because it's meant to be, the idea of the show is meant to be kind of like, just a casual kind of thing. Like, we don't want to restrict the conversation to just a single area of the Eve experience. But so if you want us to talk about certain topics, then bring it up in chat, or drop in and say hi and all that kind of stuff. But yeah.
Well, I guess for lack of a better topic at this point, heading back to the more getting into FCing thing and how that kind of works. I know all sorts of organizations have different ways of doing that, but when it comes to like an individual player who's looking to do that sort of stuff, the best thing you can do is just get friends and go out and do it. Again, my my early experience here is not Eve related; it's really World of Tanks related. But what you just kind of need to do is, as long as you get people out and take them to do something fun, doesn't matter if you win every single fight or you die really fast, as long as people are having fun, they will come back and continue to fly with you. And coupling with the things Billy was talking about earlier, it really is the best thing you can do to just keep going out, keep doing it, because eventually you're going to learn something. And people, if you have the sort of ability to learn and go, yeah, I messed up, I did these sort of things, and you guys did great, I was the one that screwed up that fight, and then people will keep coming back, and the more people that come back, the better time you're going to have overall, both playing the game and being an FC. But Garbier's been trying to get something in here, so please go ahead.
Actually, something that I was thinking when we were talking about the whole FC topic and the big fleets and the big group behavior and collaborative stuff. Am I the only one that's getting the feeling that a lot of Eve collaborative work has been losing a bit of advantage? That you don't really need to collaborate when it comes to almost everything else in the game, except for actual fleet fights.
What do you mean by collaborating?
Well, I mean that things like group effort stuff, PvE wise, production wise, it just feels as if, with the exception of a few meta things, most things can be done solo now, and I don't know if that's just me.
I'm not necessarily sure that most things can be done solo for a majority of players. Yeah, there's going to be those guys out there who run, 50, 60, how many ever accounts that have something that can cover, everything. They have, their own jump freighter pilots, their own Sino chains to, every corner of the universe and all that. But I think for the majority of players, you still do need to collaborate a lot. Like, I know I don't have a jump freighter of my own, so if I need stuff moved around where that's the most efficient way of doing it, I have to pay somebody money to do that for me. So I think that Eve is definitely at the point where you don't necessarily need other people to collaborate, but it still is easier on the wallet to pay somebody else to help you or to be part of an organization.
I think it's what I mean is that it's becoming more and more difficult to see the advantage of doing things in a collaborative way, whereas before there was bigger gaps both in labor needs and things like that.
Well, I think one of the things is like, I mean, Caleb, are you kind of hinting at sort of like, should there be direct incentives for group play in like many more other areas?
I think I'm thinking
in
about
Eve?
stuff like, well, to do an example that's maybe a little bit extreme, but mining used to be very intensive logistics wise, but then suddenly you were allowed to pick things up with your freighter in space and things like that. So now you could easily do it with 2 or 3 accounts, and you didn't actually have the requirements of having like several people in space when you were doing something on a massive scale. I just feel like they are making it easier and easier to just multi-account instead of actually collaborating.
I can see where you're coming from with that, and my counter to it would be, well, it's a game and you need to be able to have fun inside of it. And for some people, that is just doing things on their own. I think what CCP was able or has been able to do is make it so if you're going to have all those accounts to do the thing, they're going to be making enough money for it where they can continue to, offer the service. Whereas, hold on, let me rephrase this. CCP is going to be getting paid for those accounts no matter what. And it doesn't matter if it's all coming from one, if you got, say, 4 accounts that are, associated with doing an activity, it doesn't matter if those are 4 different individual people behind screens or one person with 4 clients open. How that looks is really not different. So I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing, but more a giving people with the resources to build their own, self-sufficient little empire in their tiny corner of the universe, the ability to do that while not making it so, people who don't have that option feel left out.
I think my argument is that the design choices that they have to make to do these things, to make it more, I don't know, AFK-ish or casual friendly or less labor intensive, things like that. When they do that, they are basically slowing down the game when it comes to active play, and the self-sufficiency thing becomes pretty much, well, I call it terrible, and it destroys the ecosystem, because if you do not need to work with anyone else, then most people will choose not to. Well, of course, there's a socializing aspect that is an exception to that rule, but managing people is difficult, and hence, if you can choose the option of just doing it yourself by adding another account, and it's able to actually make the money to even plex it, why would you want to collaborate with anyone? I'm just saying this because I know that when we were mining back in the day, now I'm going a little bit old school, you would need to have like 5 or more people on grid just doing the shipping of ore back and forth. That's a necessity. When suddenly you then change it to letting freighters scoop, now you can scoop your own shit all the time. There's no need for extra manpower, no need for collaboration, no need for big fleets. One idiot in his rock with his 2 other accounts can just sit there forever and do stuff. That's just, to me, that's boring, because it destroys the collaborative and the social and the emergent behavior, and the fact that now there's suddenly a sitting target in space of 15 or 20 people actually mining that someone can come and shoot. But if it's one guy, it's like finding a needle in a haystack most of the time. But I could be wrong.
Well, I guess one of the things that we could actually that could be utilized to make it a little bit more difficult is actually to have various like as you say, as you said to Caleb, like, having all of these various different roles being filled by actual people to do things, rather than just having it kind of taken up by new modules that just a single 1 or 2 ships can utilize in order to do the whole kind of the whole supply chain, the whole kind of chain for that is I kind of feel like we do need to, like, CCP does need to do a bit of like a 180 on that one, just to basically be able to get people more involved in all the various different activities in EVE, not just the PvP kind of side of things.
And if I look at the graph, right, of the concurrent players, right, if I look at the graph, about when they started to do this, what I call easy mode, Eve, that's when you start seeing the decline, right? That's when you see the numbers start tanking. Of course, there's other factors, but it just exacerbated the fact that then why would you need all these accounts? Why just close them and people leaving because there's no need for them anymore because people are doing their own thing?
You reskill them.
I'm just saying that I think it's the lack of interdependency, whether it's person to person or system to system or region to region. If there's no interdependency, there is no game.
Yeah.
Well, I think at the same time, you have to be cautious of being too interdependent to where if all the pieces aren't around, you just can't do an activity. To look back at your mining topic here, if you were ever in a situation where you were in a smaller group or a weird time zone or something like that, and it became a problem of, okay, if I am on when I can be on, I don't have the ability to do this activity which I've trained for that I want to do or whatever. And this doesn't just apply to mining, it can apply to PvP, PvE, all that sort of stuff. If you do make it too reliant on interdependence, you have the problem of, if the people I need to do the activity aren't around, I'm just going to go do something else. I think you do need to strike a balance between making sure people participate in the game together, but that you don't 100% need people to participate in the game.
No, I see where you're coming from there. Like, it's kind of like, because if you can't get certain things done that you need to get done because the people aren't around, and that's not based on it's a real world problem. Like, if people have issue, like, something that they have to do in real life, it takes precedent, obviously, in sort of playing EVE Online. But if they're doing, if you've got a bunch of people that have to do stuff in real life and they can't come on, and because of that you can't mine the prerequisite that you kind of need to in order to build something, make something within a certain deadline, then that becomes a bit of an issue. Like, that becomes a big issue. But like, I think one of the things is you can kind of almost sort of dual track this, if you kind of get me. Like, you can have the all-in-one solutions, right, which allow you to basically do what you kind of need, maybe almost like need to do, just as a much less efficient sort of way, and then have the group version, the group activity kind of version of that, where everyone's doing a very specific role and it's extremely efficient at doing, at getting the job done. I think having that kind of dual track system works so long as the single person version of that doesn't become as strong or stronger than the group activity when you multiply that up.
Well, specifically with EVE, you'd run into the problem of, if you create an activity designed for groups, what's to stop one person with multiple accounts from doing it?
Well, from that kind of aspect, it's a case of giving those the roles of that job or that group activity to be something that is extremely that it's not like time intensive or skill intensive, but it's like it requires concentration to do a specific thing.
Like input intensive?
Yeah, sort of like input intensive, like how you couldn't play 5 games of tennis at the same time, sort of thing. It requires active thought, it requires active participation, in the process that you're in the the particular area of the job that you're doing. And I think one of the things that would work really well with this is sort of mining, or maybe even if they're developing, if CCP are going to be developing the moon mining into something that more people can participate in an active sort of form rather than passively, having that kind of group activity, but each aspect of that group activity having to require a fair amount of concentration and a fair amount of coordination between would go a long way
about
to
time
sort of
sinks,
doing that.
right? It's about
Yeah.
what do you get when you scale, and it seems to me that CCP has balanced a lot of things to AFK stuff, easy mode, instant gratification, and basically in a design direction that I find, well, it is awesome if you're playing things like World of Warcraft, that you can go and then you can get a buff and then you can solo one of the old dungeons and stuff like that. That's fine. Or in games that do not have this ecosystem and economy stuff and historicity, you can't really do that. If you make it easy mode, you're destroying the content. You're destroying the unique selling point.
And you don't need to bring it that, like, you don't need to make 1,000,001 different roles that people need to do in order to be able to bring that level of like cooperation and sort of coordination into it. That means that it's less possible or not possible for one person to do all of it with 5, 6, 7 different clients.
An example would be, why are they so afraid of time sinks, right? Why do they not consider things that we have been used to being almost instant? Why don't they consider putting more strain in time in there, so the emergent content would come from that? Even if you're talking things like repairing ships in stations, why is that instant? It makes no sense. Why is it instant that you refine stuff? To me, it makes no sense. In most other games, strategic wise, things take time. There's time sinks on everything. And I think if we got that in Eve, a lot of things would improve, because there's always a consequence from that.
Well, there's Rob, did you have something that you wanted to say there? Or?
Yeah. I think there are time sinks, Caleb, and the time sinks being that you do have to mine the minerals, you do have to construct the components, you do have to make the ISK to do the components. I think adding more time sinks is not necessarily the answer. What I think your vision would lead to would be, okay, I log in for if I'm a budding industrialist, I log in for 5 minutes, plug in a refine job, log out, go play Overwatch. I'm not staying around involved in the universe at all, to the extent that my little industrial empire is capable of being. So I don't think time sinks are necessarily bad. I just think you have to be very careful about where you place them. And I think where they're placed right now, it's not perfect, but it's getting there. Just because you're focusing the time sinks on the pieces that actually matter.
Well, the point is that time sinks and bottlenecks are the only real motivation for you to outsource stuff, so you actually use other players and other players' time. If you're locking out, that's fine. But if what you want done is then put in the hands of another player, that creates content and activity for that player. If you keep doing what CCP has been doing, insourcing and making instant gratification and the whole isolationism design, you're not creating content for other players.
I think one of the things about, like, if I just want to quickly interject here, I think one of the other aspects of it is being able to provide at least some degree of accessibility to the gameplay that doesn't require you to sort of go, oh, okay, well, I'm going to have to play Eve. I'm going to play Eve for a little bit. Oh, how long is a little bit? Maybe about 6-7 hours, kind of thing, in order to, properly account for all of the the time sinks that need to be required or required for what you're doing, or even if you're outsourcing that to other people, to be able to take into account for getting certain things done. So, like, I see where you're coming from, Caleb, in certain aspects, but I think in other aspects they're like, time sinks are not there because they don't actually provide any kind of value, like either value with either gameplay that's gone missing from that time sink not being there, or value for anybody to actually experience if they were there. Like, I can
But
kind
they
of,
do,
I can,
right?
I can
You
see
take
it.
things like salvage,
Well,
and I mentioned hauling and things like
yeah.
that.
Well,
If these things are
those
not
sorts of things.
trickled down in some way, and if there's no sync, if the elite player that's shooting all this stuff can also easily get the salvage with the mobile tracking units, which is one of the horrible examples of what I'm talking about, right? Making
Yeah, I get
everything
that.
easy mode, so one guy does not need to go and pick stuff up and does not need to involve himself with other players that would then have to go and potentially loot that or salvage that or haul that ore and stuff like that. If you do not allow these things to be in the game, there is no need for an elite player to collaborate with other players.
Well, I would provide a counterpoint here. That I think what you're talking about there is different than installing time sinks into the game. Like to touch on an example you put out, repairing ships. So just to set the frame of reference here, you're a high sec mission runner. You're just kind of doing Eve because it's fun. You're in a shield tanked ship, and you kind of screw up a mission and get take some armor damage that's pretty substantial. And you fly back to the station, you hit the button, and it tells you, okay, your ship will be repaired in 20 minutes or 2 hours or whatever it is. You're not going to sit around and wait that period of time. You're going to go play something else, or go actually do something productive
Or
in
you
real
would
life.
have a spare ship.
But that's
Well,
not
there
that's not
is
something
that,
that's
but, like,
necessarily feasible
That would
for a lot.
create a need, right? That would create a need for the extra materials to have a spare, so the time sink would suddenly create content because that ship would have to be created. This is my argument. This is what I have a difficult time explaining to players because they say, oh, that's a nuisance. Yeah, but what is a nuisance to you right now when you're looking at this from a personal, subjective point of view is fair enough. The problem is that this would have created content for someone else.
And I think I understand where you're coming from, and I do agree that there is a need to have these systems feed into each other so that way all the players who are taking part have something to do. But in this specific example, you don't know if this guy who's in that situation is somebody who has the money to have a second ship. Maybe they're trying to get to that point. And yes, it is good to have spare ships because ships die. Nobody's contesting that. It's just, I think forcing people to have to wait to play the game is not the correct answer. And in doing so, specifically in this, in this little minor scenario about repairs, people who are going to run into that sort of thing may not necessarily have a spare ship. I know, like right now, I've only got like one ship for a couple given doctrines. I only have one just because with the amount of time that I'm able to use those ships versus how much they die, it doesn't make sense for me to have a spare around. So sure, if your system was in place, it may make sense to have a spare around, but then that also raises the barrier of entry very, very high. If you're doing L4s on a very limited budget, and you have to have 2 identically fit Ravens around to be able to do that, that's something that just makes the barrier of entry to get into that very high, and something that people are going to just shy away from and go, well, I don't care to make the money to afford 2 of these things. I just want to have my one, and I want to go run missions in my ship.
I think the problem is, to me, now I am a bit of an ancient player and I've been used to the original unique selling point of Eve since like forever. So now running on almost 15 years. My point is that I see more and more players coming in, and the thing that they want, they are basing it on and comparing it to what they want when they play other games. And I don't really see that as an argument. They keep saying, well, but this is just a game, and I wouldn't stay around if I couldn't do this or that, or if I had to wait for a time sink, or if there was too many money sinks, or if I couldn't afford the high-end stuff. It's like, well, then don't play this game. This is not what it's about. The game you're playing when you're playing Eve is an ecosystem and an economic and a PvP simulator. This is not World of Warcraft. This is not games that you're used to. You can't just hit the space button and get a new ship. You have to actually work for it or collaborate or source it from somewhere, because that's why it matters on a historical point of view. That's why it matters when you die. And I just get frustrated when I hear this. Well, then people wouldn't play. Yes, they would. The argument is moot. They think they wouldn't play, but they actually would, because the consequences would make the game even more fun. That's what it used to be.
The problem there is then you've painted the game into this little niche of people who have the ability to be involved over long periods. Whereas, if you do that, that means less people will be able to actively participate, and thereby, of consequence, there will be less people in the universe for it to affect. So what I think the tightrope you have to walk it. Hold on, let me finish.
But you're doing circular.
Let me finish. The tightrope you have to walk here is one of having enough people in the universe for these things to matter. If you don't have enough people, all the things you're talking about, no matter how cool they are, just aren't.
Without that trickle down, they don't matter. So then it becomes a circular argument. Without the design suggestions that I've just given, that would create value for the whole range of what you might call economic classes or skill level classes in EVE. Without that trickle down like effect, without those dependencies, those new players do not really have value. The joke really is here that the only thing alphas are good at the moment is to be utilized for trolley-like behavior or fuck you fleets and stuff like that. It's like, that's not really valuable.
Well, I'd counter with that and say that fuck you fleets are actually particularly valuable. Like, you know, I've seen and I've utilized ships in that fuck you fleet that, you know, are exceptionally good at disrupting, you know, the effectiveness of, you know, even highly skilled players in extremely expensive ships. So, you know, in terms of saying that, like, you know, alphas don't have any value whatsoever except for being able to troll, like, I wouldn't actually put that.
Okay, let me rephrase it. It's that from an economic point of view, right? The majority should be important, right? So just like in real life, the majority of taxation money does not come from the wealthy people. It comes from normal working class people.
Yeah. But
I'd like to bring up a point here that Port 66 is making in chat, where he's made a couple of good ones so far. You say you got to get something in? Or?
No, go for it.
Okay, so what Port's mentioned a couple of times, you know, I think his first comment in this little chain that's up right now is pretty important. People won't play the game if you have to wait for everything, and if you rely on people and they're not around, that inhibits you from doing stuff. So with what you're saying, Caleb, I think you need. I think you're the one making the circular argument here, in that if you add more complexity, people will continue to come. And that's exactly the opposite of my experience, where if something's too complex, too reliant on other individuals,
but
to where
it's not complexity. It's not complexity. It's just interaction dependencies. That's not complexity.
Interaction dependencies does add complexity to a multiplayer game. It does, because you need other people to do things. So if you get into a situation where you gave somebody, to use your example, the minerals to refine or whatever, and then due to real life they don't show up for 2 weeks, and you're left holding the open build, that doesn't work. So you need to strike a balance between people being able to do things on their own, so people want to log in and play the game, and making sure that all the systems function are dependent enough on each other, where you do have all that stuff. You're right in that there does need to be some measure of economic complexity and interdependence in the game. I think taking it to the opposite extreme of where it is now would be bad for the long-term health of the game. You may see a little bit of improvement in some specific areas that you probably pay a lot more attention to than I do, being some dumb F1 grunt. But if you get into that situation where it really is only people who have an interest in these high-level economic things, where does that leave everybody else?
But that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the value of 4 people hauling for a miner should be more valuable than one person just making an alt account and putting a freighter pilot on it. That's my argument.
Yeah, and
it ties into all the other things that I said.
That makes sense.
The value of labor is too low, especially it's not comparable to the scaling of skills and the tiers of ships and stuff like that, and the difference between alpha and omega. I would say that 5 alpha should at least make up for 1 omega, if not more.
So
in
the problem,
any aspect of the game.
problem is if you like increase the amount of labor that's required in the manner that you're describing here, it does make it so it becomes a less fun experience. In a vacuum, like if we were just talking about people who played Eve only ever played Eve, that it was the only thing competing for their free time attention, I think you're right. I think there's room to expand labor, the value of manpower hours in that sort of scenario. But we can't look at Eve in a vacuum. Right now on the computer that I'm on, I've got a bunch of other games installed: Wargame, Red Dragon, Overwatch, World of Tanks, all that sort of stuff. That if Eve just isn't working out for me as much as I'd love to.
But didn't you get what I
Hold
said?
on.
I didn't say that it
Hang on a
should
minute,
be
hang on.
possible to do alone. I said that it should be more valuable if you didn't do it alone. And the
But
problem is that at the moment, it's the opposite.
The problem is, though, if you make it less valuable to do alone, then it just becomes a thing of where the people who have that ability to coordinate and be involved are just going to run away from everybody else. So the scenario there being, who made more money back when the Imperium was in Declan? The one guy who just had a single Ishtar to go rat with, the guy who had 20 accounts with carriers on them. You get into a disparity situation like that where the individuals who can't, for some reason, either be it lack of skills, lack of money, lack of time, can't participate in the game to the full extent that everybody else can, you run into problems where the game just stops being fun, and then all these other options are just more entertaining. So you would go do something else rather than stay and play the game.
And all this kind of almost comes back into to a sort of an argument of accessibility, right? So it's like, are you building a game to be more accessible? Are you building a game to be deeper? And striking that kind of balance is a really difficult thing to do, especially for CCP.
Of the new
and it's,
players,
and
right?
it's
The
yeah,
lower
it's
the
value of
value
game.
is, the higher the barrier of entry, because the less motivation for other players to help them.
But yeah, and the kind of example that we were using in terms of like mining is like, you do want to strike that balance of accessibility to be able to mine, so you don't need to be constantly like dependent upon other people around, but striking the balance of, if you do have those people around, it's more efficient and you get better productivity than if you had that same amount of people but just basically clones of you working and doing the same sort of thing that you're doing on one single client. But like at the moment, I'm gonna have to close this up because we're out of time, gentlemen. Thank you very much, everybody, for pitching in your thoughts and your comments and ideas and stuff. But as for today, that'll be it for Talking in Stations After Show. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for everybody there, sort of pitching in comments in the Twitch chat, and for the donations and the subs and the follows and such things. And this has been McLeod, and we are out. Thank you.